They called me a charity case, unworthy of their name, their table, their world. I stayed silent for my husband, for love. But that night, when the spotlight turned, they realized who they had been insulting all along. The nobody they mocked was the daughter of the man who owned it all. If you've ever been insulted for your background or made to feel small, this story will give you strength. Watch till the end, because the moment truth walks in, pride bows down. Like, comment, and subscribe for more stories where karma arrives wearing elegance. When I married Adrian, I thought my life had finally found its peace. He was gentle, intelligent, the kind of man who could make a crowded room disappear just by looking into your eyes. From the very first day, he made me believe that love could be simple, that two hearts could beat louder than a world obsessed with status. But I was wrong about one thing. Love might be pure, but the world around it rarely is. Adrian came from an elite old money family, the type who judged kindness as weakness and humility as shame. His mother, Eleanor, looked at me the way people look at something that doesn't belong. A quiet disgust hidden behind a polite smile. His sister, Clara, followed her lead, whispering words like charity case and small-town girl whenever I entered the room. They didn't know me, yet they had already decided who I was. I told myself their cruelty didn't matter. I told myself I could win them over. After all, I wasn't after their approval. I loved their son. And Adrian, my sweet Adrian, loved me back. He didn't see my simple clothes, my modest background, or my quiet nature. He only saw the person who stood beside him when he had no one else. That's why I stayed silent when they humiliated me at dinners, when they excluded me from family photos, and when they corrected the way I spoke as if kindness were a flaw. What Adrian didn't know, what no one in that house knew, was that I wasn't the charity case they thought I was. My family, the Harrisons, built one of the largest private foundations in the country, but my father had always taught me that real wealth was not about money, it was about integrity. So I never revealed who I was. I wanted to be loved for my heart, not my last name, yet silence has a cost. The more I endured, the more they mistook my patience for weakness. Every insult they threw made me shrink a little smaller in my own home. Sometimes late at night, I'd sit by the window and wonder if love was enough to survive constant disrespect. But then Adrian would hold me, whispering promises of a better future, and I'd choose faith over pride once again. I remember one night when Eleanor told me coldly, "You may have his heart, but you'll never have his family." I smiled through the sting, pretending her words didn't cut deep. If only she knew how wrong she was, how the very foundation of their family's fortune would soon stand beneath my father's name. Back then, I stayed quiet for love, but love without respect has an expiration date, and the day they finally pushed me too far was the day the truth walked in wearing my last name. The first few months after our wedding felt like walking on glass. Every step I took made someone flinch. Adrian tried to keep peace between me and his family, but peace doesn't exist where pride rules the table. His mother, Eleanor, ran the house like a queen. Every meal was a performance, every word measured, every glance sharp enough to cut through skin. And I, the outsider, was her favorite target. At first, the cruelty came dressed as advice. "You should dress more like a Whitmore," she'd say with a smile that never reached her eyes. "You have lovely manners, dear, but sophistication takes time." I laughed it off, thinking she was just trying to help me fit in. But then came the whispers, the ones she didn't mean for me to hear. "We took her in out of pity," she told one of her friends during a tea gathering. "Adrian's heart has always been too soft. Let's hope she learns her place before she embarrasses us all." That night, I cried silently on our balcony while the city lights blurred behind my tears. Adrian found me there and wiped them away, promising he'd talk to his mother. But deep down, I knew he wouldn't. He loved me, yes, but he feared disappointing his family even more. So I smiled the next morning, pretending nothing had happened, pretending the pain wasn't real. Days turned into weeks, and the house began to feel like a gilded cage. Clara would hand me trays of drinks during family events, calling it helping out. I'd serve the very guests who whispered about my background. Sometimes they'd hand me their coats, thinking I was staff, and every time Eleanor would just watch, a faint smirk tugging at her lips, satisfied by my silence. But silence can be dangerous. It builds storms inside you that one day demand release. I started writing again, small notes of everything I felt, every insult, every humiliation. Those pages became my secret strength. My father used to tell me, when people underestimate you, don't argue. Just prepare, his voice echoed in my head each time Eleanor's words stung. Still, I endured, not out of fear but out of love for Adrian. He wasn't cruel. He was blind. Blind to the cost of my loyalty, to the weight of his family's disdain. He thought protecting me meant asking me to stay quiet. But love doesn't grow in silence, it withers there. I told myself I could survive anything if I had his heart. But even hearts can falter when surrounded by poison. And I could feel mine breaking, slowly, quietly, every time Eleanor called me the girl who got lucky. What she didn't know was that luck had nothing to do with my life. I had simply chosen humility. And one day, she would learn the difference. The news came one morning over breakfast, elegant and sharp, like everything in that house. Eleanor announced it with pride shimmering in her voice. "The Whitmore Foundation Gala will be held next month," she said, lifting her teacup as though the world revolved around her. "The most influential families will be there." "We'll host," of course, I smiled softly, trying to hide my nervous excitement. The gala wasn't just an event, it was the event. The entire city's elite gathered there, journalists, investors, artists, all celebrating the legacy of the Whitmore name. I had always imagined attending with Adrian, standing by his side, showing the world that our love was stronger than their judgments. But the moment I opened my mouth to ask about the details, Eleanor's gaze sliced through my dream. "You won't be attending, Paisley." Her tone was casual, almost dismissive, as she buttered her toast. I froze. "I won't?" She didn't look up. "You're not ready for that kind of company." "People talk, dear. They know your background. It's best if you sit this one out, for everyone's sake." Her words hit me harder than I expected. I looked at Adrian, hoping he'd speak up. He shifted uncomfortably, avoiding my eyes. "Mother, maybe—" he started, but Eleanor cut him off. "No, Adrian. The family's reputation is at stake. One wrong impression, one misplaced word, and years of our work could crumble. We can't take that risk. That's what I was to them. Not a wife, not a daughter-in-law, just a risk they needed to hide." I swallowed my pain, forcing my voice to stay calm. "If my presence embarrasses you, I'll stay home." The words tasted like metal, but I said them anyway. Because arguing would only make it worse for Adrian. Clara smirked across the table. "See? She understands her place." That moment changed something in me. It wasn't just humiliation, it was awakening. For months, I had endured their cruelty quietly. But being told I wasn't worthy to stand beside my own husband in public, that broke something deep inside. Later that night, Adrian came to me, guilt written across his face. "Paisley, I'm sorry. You know how my mother gets. Once this gala is over, I'll make things right. Please don't be upset." I looked at him, the man I loved more than my own pride, and nodded. "I'm not upset," I lied softly. "Just tired." He kissed my forehead, believing me. But inside, my silence wasn't surrender anymore. It was strength building in quiet shadows. Because what they didn't know was this: the Whitmore Foundation Gala wasn't their event at all. The real sponsor, the one financing the evening, was my father's foundation. The same father they had never met. They thought I was staying home out of shame. But I was only waiting for the perfect moment when truth would walk in uninvited and turn their world upside down. The night of the gala arrived like a storm I'd been expecting. Dazzling on the outside, dangerous beneath. The Whitmore mansion shimmered under crystal chandeliers and golden drapes, ready to impress the city's elite. Limousines lined the long marble driveway. I could hear the hum of laughter and the flash of cameras even from the balcony of my room, where I stood alone in silence. Adrian had left an hour earlier, dressed in his tailored gray tuxedo, his expression torn between pride and guilt. He had kissed my forehead before leaving, whispering, "I'll make it up to you." I smiled for him, though every beat of my heart felt heavy with something deeper than sadness. It was dignity turning into resolve. Downstairs, I could hear Eleanor's laughter echoing through the grand hall as she welcomed her guests, politicians, entrepreneurs, and socialites, the kind who fed off admiration and status. I could picture her perfectly, flawless, radiant, soaking in the envy of others. She loved power because it made her feel untouchable. I sat in my room, looking at the golden gown laid out on my bed. My father had sent it earlier that morning with a note that read, "A queen never needs permission to attend her own coronation." I smiled faintly. He didn't know everything, but somehow he always knew enough. As the clock struck 8, the gala was in full swing. I imagined Eleanor raising her glass, bragging about her family's legacy, about the son who married for love, the charity case they saved from obscurity. They didn't know the irony of their words. The hall they stood in, the sponsorships funding the event, even the new foundation wing being unveiled tonight, all of it was backed by my father's company. Then came the moment that shifted everything. The orchestra quieted as the announcer's voice echoed through the ballroom speakers. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have a special announcement. Tonight's VIP guest of honor, the benefactor behind the Whitmore Foundation's success, please welcome Mr. Harrison and his daughter, Miss Paisley Harrison." The room fell silent. Eleanor's glass slipped from her hand, shattering against the floor. The color drained from her face. Adrian froze mid-conversation, his eyes widening as he turned toward the grand entrance. And there I was, walking through the gilded doors beside my father. The golden gown shimmered under the lights, every step measured, calm, deliberate. I wasn't the timid girl they used to command. I was the daughter of the man who had quietly built the very empire they boasted about. Whispers spread like wildfire. That's her? The wife they called a charity case? Eleanor stumbled for words, her pride crumbling before her guests. My father greeted her warmly, his tone gentle but firm. "Mrs. Whitmore, thank you for hosting this lovely event. I'm glad my daughter and I could attend. After all, this foundation means a great deal to us." Every head turned toward me. Adrian's eyes met mine, full of shock, confusion, and something else, admiration. That night, the girl they tried to hide walked into their world, not as a guest, but as the name they could no longer ignore. The room froze the moment I stepped inside. You could have heard a diamond drop on that marble floor. All those people who once laughed behind my back, the ones who whispered that I didn't belong, now stood wide-eyed, unsure whether to bow, smile, or hide. It was the kind of silence that strips away every illusion of superiority. My father's presence commanded the space. He moved with calm assurance, shaking hands with dignitaries, exchanging polite words with journalists who suddenly swarmed to his side. Every guest knew him. The Harrison Foundation's name carried more weight than the Whitmores ever could. And now, they knew his daughter was the woman the Whitmore family had mocked as a charity case. Eleanor tried to compose herself. She forced a laugh, the kind that trembles under panic. "Oh, Mr. Harrison, what a surprise! We weren't expecting—" My father cut her off with a smile that could silence a crowd. "Really? That's odd. My company sponsored this entire event." A few gasps rippled through the hall. I could see the color drain from her cheeks. Adrian stood there speechless, torn between disbelief and awe. I caught his eye and smiled softly, the same quiet smile I'd worn when they first rejected me. But this time, it wasn't submission. It was power. My father gestured toward me, his voice carrying effortlessly across the ballroom. "This evening isn't about money or names. It's about compassion, something my daughter understands better than most. She built the core program of this foundation long before her marriage. I'm proud to finally acknowledge her publicly. Cameras flashed, microphones appeared, and Eleanor's carefully crafted world collapsed one photograph at a time. The crowd erupted in applause, cheering my name. Paisley Harrison, the woman they thought was unworthy. Eleanor's lips trembled as she leaned toward me, whispering through her forced smile. "You deceived us." I looked at her, my voice low but steady. "No, Mrs. Whitmore. I just never corrected your assumptions." Clara stood near the corner, frozen, her glass shaking in her hand. She avoided my eyes completely. Adrian finally stepped forward, his expression full of realization and shame. "Paisley, why didn't you tell me?" I took a deep breath. "Because I wanted someone to love me for who I was, not what I came from. I didn't want my last name to make you proud of me. I wanted my heart to." His eyes softened, guilt and love blending into something sincere. "I should have believed in you more," he whispered. And for the first time that night, my heart ached, not from humiliation but from forgiveness, fighting its way through old wounds. Around us, applause continued to echo through the ballroom. The very people who once turned their backs now reached out to shake my hand. The girl they had tried to erase had become the headline of their own story. And the silence that followed wasn't cruel anymore. It was respect. As the applause faded, I stood on that grand stage, not as someone seeking validation, but as someone reclaiming her voice. The lights glimmered above me, reflecting off the chandeliers like scattered stars. For a moment, I closed my eyes and breathed. Every insult, every whispered word, every lonely tear in that mansion had led to this one moment of quiet justice. The host approached me with a microphone. "Ms. Harrison," he said respectfully, "would you like to say a few words?" I took the mic, my palms steady, my heart calm. "Thank you," I began, my voice carrying across the silent ballroom. "For a long time, I believed that love and kindness were enough to make people see your worth. But I learned something. Some people will never see your value until the world forces them to look." Gasps and murmurs rippled through the audience. I continued, my tone soft but firm. "True class isn't measured by how much money you have or how grand your name sounds. It's measured by how you treat people who can't give you anything in return." I glanced toward Eleanor and Clara. Their faces were pale, eyes glistening, not from pride, but realization. For months, I was told I didn't belong here, that I wasn't good enough to stand beside my husband, but tonight, I stand here not because of my name, but because I refuse to let cruelty define me. The audience broke into applause again, a wave of clapping that seemed to echo all the way back to the nights I had cried in silence. Adrian stood frozen, his eyes never leaving mine. I saw the conflict in him, guilt, love, and pride all tangled into one expression that said more than words ever could. Eleanor finally approached me, her hands trembling. "Paisley," she said quietly, her voice unsteady. I didn't know." I looked at her, calm but resolute. "You didn't want to know. Because you thought kindness came from weakness. But tonight should remind you, it takes far more strength to stay kind in a world that rewards cruelty." Tears welled in her eyes, her perfect poise melting away. For the first time, she didn't see me as a threat. She saw me as a mirror. Adrian came closer, his hand brushing mine. "You could have humiliated them, Paisley, but you didn't." I smiled faintly. "Humiliation isn't victory, Adrian. Dignity is." The crowd rose to their feet, a standing ovation filling the room as I handed the microphone back. The cameras caught everything, not a revenge story, but redemption in its purest form. That night, I didn't walk out as the billionaire's daughter or the misunderstood wife. I walked out as a woman who finally remembered who she was and refused to forget it ever again. The morning after the gala felt different. The same city that once whispered my name with pity now spoke it with admiration. Headlines filled every newspaper. The charity case who owned the gala. Paisley Harrison's speech redefines grace. the woman who silenced high society with dignity. As I sipped my tea by the window, sunlight poured across the marble floor. Warm, golden, forgiving. For the first time in months, the house was quiet. No insults, no judging stares, no laughter behind closed doors, just silence, the peaceful kind. Eleanor came to see me that afternoon. Her tone was softer, her eyes no longer cold. She held out a small box. Inside was the family heirloom bracelet she had once refused to let me wear. "I misjudged you," she said quietly. "I was so afraid of losing control that I forgot what grace looks like." I closed the box gently. "You didn't lose control," I told her. "You just met someone who wouldn't bow to it." For a moment we both smiled, not out of friendship, but out of understanding. Clara sent me a message later that evening, a simple text that read, "I'm sorry. You didn't deserve any of it," and for the first time, I believed she meant it. Adrian came home early that night. He wrapped his arms around me from behind, resting his chin on my shoulder. "You changed everything," he whispered. "I don't even know how to make this right." I turned to face him. "You already did. The moment you stopped letting them speak for you." We stood there for a long time, just breathing, as if the weight of every cruel word had finally lifted off our shoulders. Love didn't feel fragile anymore. It felt earned, tested, true. In the weeks that followed, I took charge of the family foundation, not out of revenge, but purpose. We shifted focus toward helping women who had been silenced, underestimated, or humiliated, just like I once was. The same ballroom that witnessed my pain became the hall where I announced scholarships, mentorships, and grants for women chasing dreams despite mockery. At the next gala, I didn't need a spotlight or a grand entrance. I simply stood on stage, surrounded by stories of resilience, and smiled, knowing that this, not revenge, was victory. As I ended my speech that night, I looked at the crowd and said, "When they underestimate you, don't get angry. Get better. Let your success be the noise that answers every insult." The applause was thunderous, but my heart was calm, because true power doesn't roar, it whispers. And for anyone listening to my story, I want you to remember this. You never need to prove your worth to those who refuse to see it. Just rise, and one day, even those who doubted you will stand when you enter the room. If this story reminded you that respect can't be bought, it's earned, then hit that like button, share this story with someone who needs courage today, and subscribe for more tales where dignity always wins over pride, because the loudest revenge is grace.